Alison here. Welcome to our second bracelet making tutorial. Today we're going to be creating a copper cuff bracelet with a square braid using 8 wires. I'm going to guide you through from start to finish and throw in a little bit of resourcefulness at the same time. At the end of this video, you'll be able to master this bracelet and I'm sure have a lot of fun doing it. I'm also going to give you a sneak peek at our next tutorial. So let's get nifty, don the gloves and head to the bench. We're going to be braiding, I'm going to use the hook again and not a vise. I actually prefer using a hook for the braid because your pattern can get started much quicker. With a vise, the initial stages seem to get sort of snagged, especially when you're bending your wire or trying to get a 90-degree bend. So we're going with the hook. We're going to need quite a sturdy pair of pliers or grips because once we've annealed our braid, we're actually going to be stretching the pattern into place. I will show you how later on. It's quite a sturdy pair of side cutters. We are using 16 gauge wire, so that'll come in handy. I've just improvised. I put a bit of shrink tape on the ends of these pliers. So obviously, if you've got nylon jawed pliers, go with them. Hammer, a file for the cuff ends, and just to finally finish off the cuff ends, I'm using an 800 sandpaper. It's wet. I actually just use it dry. A little anvil. It's a failed resin project. It comes in handy. It helps me bend that arc of the bracelet as well. But we're going to be using this at the stage to tap the wires of the pattern into place. Going to be using a little jeweler's torch, and then I've just got a little backing plate that I slip up to the back there and anneal my work. Just let it cool down on its own. I don't drench it all. To get onto the wire, this is the measurement of my wrist, so, and I have made it slightly longer. We will snip off an amount right at the end, snip off to size, but it's good to have a little bit of length to play with. And I've got 4 lengths of 60 centimeter 16 gauge wire here. We're going to bend it over the hook and we're going to end up with 8 30 centimeter wires. Then go on to the cleaning material, some dishwashing liquid, some vinegar, it's 5%. Then I've decanted some bicarbonate of soda or baking soda into here, and with some super glue we will finish our cuff ends off. So let's get our wires bent over this hook and secured. I'm using a 16 gauge wire. I think it is ideal for this pattern. If you use a thinner gauge, the pattern sort of seems to disappear. It does not do the pattern justice whatsoever. If you go onto a 14 gauge or anything thicker, it is pretty, but it becomes quite chunky. Too chunky, I reckon, for this pattern. So that's 16 gauge. This is salvaged wire, bare copper that I'm using, and it's all tangled up, but I'll get it right now. This was recycled from or salvaged from house wire. Okay. Let's get a little pair of pliers there and nip that in. With the wires secured nicely, we're going to begin our pattern. I just want to mention, if you want to get your hand into the pattern quickly, take a thinner gauge wire and practice a little bit until you are okay with it. Yeah, and remember, it's not really flexible like paracord, so we're actually going to be kinking the bends into place. So what you do is you split your 8 wires in half, okay? Then you're going to split them in half again on that side, on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you're going to take the top wire and you're going to bend it down and come right across. Put your finger in there and kink that bottom wire with your thumb and your pointer. And then you're going to come up through these two wires. Come up basically at a 90-degree and then come down towards your other wires at a 90-degree angle as well. Put your thumb and your pointer there and give it a squeeze. Kink that bend into place every single time. Okay. Then we're going to split the right into two wires and two wires there. And we're going to take the top left and we're going to go under. Catch that wire, kink it as it's bending, up at a 90-degree and down at a 90-degree to the rest of your wires here. Okay, I'm going to split the wires in two there again. You'll see your pattern will start off a little bit unevenly. We'll get into the pattern now and it'll tidy up nicely. So down, up between those two sets of wires and down towards your other wires on the right hand side. Kink that into place, give it a little jig. So you'll find every time you take a wire, let's say from the right hand side, you're basically going under these two sets of wires and you're going back to the same side. Down, up and over. Kink that. Split your wires in two again. Down, through those two sets of wires. Up, take your wire at the end. Don't try not to bend it in the middle because your wire gets very work hardened quite quickly then. And down. Pull it a little bit, give it a nice little tension. You will also see that the bottom of this pattern is it's looser than the top. Here's an example. You'll see the top of the pattern is quite tight, yet when you look at the bottom of the pattern, it's a little bit wider than the top and the sides. This is the 14 gauge that I used. So you've got to kink that bottom one in nicely, otherwise you're going to have a loose affair at the end of your pattern. So a nice way to see which side to start is you'll see the higher wire there is the one you're going to take. So split those two, under and over. Kink it in. There's the higher wire. So you split those two, take it under, up at a 90-degree, over at a 90-degree. Thumb pointer on there and give it a tug. Higher wire, split on the opposite side, under and over, under and then over. I made the measurements of the wire a little bit longer, so 30 centimeters should accommodate that hook, extra hook, wire that you use to fasten on the hook, and it should give you enough play to actually finish your workpiece with enough, or being able to give enough tension right through. Just have a look. Where's our little wire we need to measure? So we've got a way to go still. If it is a little bit uneven, we'll just also, once we've annealed it, we're just going to tap it out with a hammer as well. I'll show you how to do that. I think we've gone far enough. I'm just going to twist these wires in a little bit. Okay, so with this finished off, we're just going to anneal the copper quickly. Just put that plate over there. So with the copper nicely annealed into a nice dull grey, what you're going to do is just either take a pair of vice grips, plumber's pliers, or an ordinary pair of pliers, quite strong ones if possible, and nip that there, bend your wire over, okay. We're going to stretch our pattern, so any little bit of unevenness is going to stretch in, and if we've got anything over that is a little bit uneven, we'll just tap it into place. Okay, so let's go. I think that should do it. Okay, I'll clip it off about there. Okay. All right, so now we can just give it a little bit of a tap here and there, just to, you might want to give it a more of a twist. It seems like it's twisted a bit. And tap it gently. You don't want to mar the copper. If you've got a nylon headed hammer, that is ideal. But this is quite, if you're tapping softly, you're not going to damage it. I'm going to put this in vinegar and salt and let it clean up a little bit, and then I'll be back. Okay, just to show you what I'm going to basically pickle this with is white spirit vinegar. It's actually acetic acid that we're going to be using in a diluted form. And interestingly enough, if you add salt to vinegar, it brings down the pH level. So if you think about vinegar, acetic acid having a pH level of 2.9, adding salt brings it down to a pH level of 2.75. So let's do that. Give it a little wriggle and a swirl. That's almost instant. Look at that. I can get that out there. It's been a couple of minutes. It's nice and clean. My gloves aren't. Right, move that over there, out the way. Right. And we're going to do some dishwashing liquid. This has got a pH level of approximately 10. Okay, so not only is it going to clean the copper, but it's going to put a dead stop to any further acid reaction to your copper. So it's basically neutralizing the acid. Okay, we don't have to polish it up too much, but we basically want these cuffs, or the cuff ends, nice and clean, so we can finish them off. We're going to be finishing them off, as I said earlier, with super glue and baking soda or bicarbonate of soda. Just rinse that in a bit of water. It off. Okay, and here we go. Minute or two. It's so hot here today, it'll dry very quickly. And then we are going to clip it to size, cut it to size, and do our ends. So with the wire nicely cleaned up, it's time to do the super glue. All you do is cut it to size now, okay? And any little wires that might be sort of splayed out or whatever, just nip them in a little bit. Don't put too much force on there. We just want a nice evenness there. Okay. And then we can do our super glue. So not too much. We just want the super glue to penetrate those little holes there. Don't want to go too high. And then just take your bicarbonate of soda or baking soda and dip it in there. So your baking soda is accelerating the drying process of the super glue. It dries very, very quickly. And at the same time, creating a matrix there to fill in the gaps. Okay, let's go on to this side. Put in there. That's all you need. All right, so we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to come back and file it. Quite hard and dry, so we're going to file. Use your file, for those that don't know, use your file in one direction. If you use that up and down action, you're basically clogging up your file. You want your file to last a little bit longer, just use one direction. Okay, I'm going to finish filing these, and I'll be back. We're going to go onto a sandpaper, smooth them off very nicely, and then we're going to be adding a little bit more super glue just to give it a bit of a sheen after the filing. Tiny little amounts. We just want to seal that mix off and give it a sheen. Maybe it'll strengthen the joint as well. So let's shape our bracelet quickly. I'm going to see, this is the underside that I told you about earlier, the slightly wider braid in comparison to the side braids. Okay, so we're going to want that wider side against our skin. So we're going to be bending it that away. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to twist that on its side, center it, get my arc, Don't think we need to hammer it at this stage. What you do is you push in with your thumbs, and you're using your fingers as a guide. You're pushing out with your fingers and in with your thumbs. Get some assistance here. Get up, guys. Okay, so that's basically what you need. Slight arc there, not too much of an arc. And then your cuffs just adjust to your wrist measurements. What to do now is tap it nice and square. You'll see it is inclined to twist a little bit like a snake. Let's take our anvil, just get a little cloth just to protect the bottom of your copper while you're tapping it out. Grab your hammer, nylon hammer if you have. Otherwise, I've improvised. This is just a tap washer I've glued onto the end of my hammer. And you basically just gonna tap it so it lies nice and flat. Careful of hitting the super glue area, it might break it. I think that's done it. Let's have a look. That's pretty square now. It's lying nice and flat. And that's our bracelet. Peep of the next tutorial. It is a 7-wire flat braid. I went to a 14 gauge and I actually hammered this one, and I've given it a rustic sort of a look. I think we're going to be going with this one. Maybe perhaps just the basic pattern. We'll see how the tutorial goes. If it's not too long, I'll extend it and take it a little bit further and show you the hammering and the rest of that process. Anyway, that's it.